Good morning, everybody. Just a reminder, I think it was last week sometime I heard a cell phone going off. Just a reminder that please put them on silent, if not switched off. Thank you. Yes, Mr.
Good morning, Commissioner and members. We are ready to proceed. The next witness is Mr. Frans Lekubo. He is present and ready to testify, and he would prefer to do the affirmation and not the oath.
Yes, sir. Your full names, please.
Frans Lekubo.
Lekubo. Do you have any objections to taking the oath?
Yes, I'd like to do an affirmation.
You would?
I'd prefer to do an affirmation. Yeah.
Right. Do you affirm that the evidence that you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, but nothing but the truth? Please confirm.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, can I, as last week, be seated while proceeding? Thank you. Mr. Lekubo,
Yes.
can you tell the Commission about yourself, where you're from, where you studied?
Yes. Yeah, my name is Frans Lekubo. I'm the Director of Naledi Advisory Services. The company which I founded in 2016. Prior to that, I was with PwC in the Forensic Services Division since 2001 up until 2016. So I'd spent 16 years with PwC as a forensic auditor. I resigned from PwC in 2016.
I know that there's going to be a record of your evidence, but please slow down a bit.
Slow down
Okay,
a bit.
all right. I tend to speak fast, so just remind me. All right, if I tend to speak so fast. So I spent 16 years there in the forensic services team. I became a director. I resigned from PwC to be as a director there to form Naledi Advisory Services, of which I'm a director. I've got a bachelor's degree.
Quiet. Cool.
All right. I've got a bachelor's degree from the University of Pretoria. In my time with PwC,
Study at the University of Pretoria?
I've got a commerce degree from University of Pretoria.
Say that again?
I've got a commerce degree.
Commerce degree. Yes.
And I would have spent, I spent time, as I said, in the Forensic Services Division at PwC. I received training on becoming a forensic auditor within still with PwC, performed various forensic audits and investigations.
Are you saying you are still with PwC?
No. I left them in 2016 to form Naledi Advisory Services. I'm a director of Naledi Advisory Services. We are a specialist forensic services firm. We conduct forensic audits and investigations for clients both in the public and private sector.
Okay, can I interrupt you? I think to put the brakes on your speed, I will ask you questions and then you answer that.
All right.
Have you been involved in the Learning and Education Department of PwC?
Yes, I was involved with the LNE division of PwC. I've performed training. I've provided training internally to our own internal staff members, both in the country and overseas.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Yeah. All right. Now, in your capacity as a forensic auditor, are you registered with any of the professional bodies in South Africa?
Yes, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners.
Is that an international organization?
Yeah, it is.
For professional forensic investigators?
Yes.
Now, as a forensic investigator, did you testify in disciplinary matters?
Yes, I've testified in various disciplinary matters, civil matters and criminal matters.
As an expert witness?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, can we now proceed with the investigations you performed at the Public Investment Corporation?
Yes.
And again, try and slow down, listen carefully what I'm asking you, and answer just the question. You were mandated by the PIC, I believe, in September 2017.
Correct.
To look at?
To conduct an investigation into the leaking of their confidential information and malicious reporting against various allegations against the CEO and the CFO.
Now, it's public knowledge that the author of this email appeared to be a certain James Nogu. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And part of your mandate was to try and identify who this person was.
Yes.
Who gave you the instruction?
The CEO of the PIC at the time.
Is that Dr. Dan Mutulu?
Yes.
Now, I believe, Mr. Lekubu, that in the process of this investigation, you discovered something else.
Yes. While we conducting the investigation to try and establish how the confidential PIC information was leaked and who could be responsible for leaking it, we came across information that there was a criminal case which was registered by a staff member against the CEO of the PIC, and that investigation was ongoing. And he was not aware, nor the PIC aware.
Of this criminal matter and charge against the then CEO, Dr. Mutulu.
Yes.
Now, if you can just have a look at your report, and that is the report titled Investigation into circumstances relating to the opening of a corruption case against the Chief Executive Officer of the Public Investment Corporation by certain staff members. Do you have that in front of you?
Yeah.
Can you turn to page 6?
Yeah, I'm there.
Now, can you just read into the record what is stated on page 6, paragraph 1, background and mandate?
Okay. So paragraph 1.1, we say, based on our meeting held with the PIC on 18 September 2017, we understand that the PIC experienced the following: A, leaking of confidential information to external parties; B, circulation of malicious reports against its CEO and CFO to staff members and the board of directors via an unknown web-based email account. We're therefore in 1.2, we are appointed by the PIC to conduct an investigation into the leaking of confidential information and the circulation of malicious reports against the CEO and the CFO. And the objective of the investigation was A, to identify parties responsible for the leaking of confidential information and circulation of malicious reports against the CEO and CFO. B, to establish how the confidential information was obtained and leaked, and of course to report on our findings and make recommendations. 1.3, during our investigation, we established that the senior manager of IT security at PIC had opened a corruption case against the CEO of the PIC with the South African Police Service. PIC therefore extended our scope to include conducting an investigation into the circumstances relating to the opening of the corruption case against the CEO of the PIC.
If I can just interrupt you there again.
Yeah.
When you discovered this, did you then report it to the CEO?
I reported the CEO and the board.
And as a result of that report, the scope of the investigation was extended to include this?
Yes, the board extended the scope of our investigation to include investigation into the circumstances relating to the corruption case against the CEO.
Can you deal with paragraph 1.5 then?
Yes, that deals with the extension of our scope. The objective then of the investigation, the extension, was to establish whether the staff members had a mandate from the PIC to open a case of corruption against the CEO with SEPS, to establish a timeline of events relating to the corruption case against the CEO, what led to the opening of the corruption case against the CEO, Whether the staff members involved in the opening of the corruption case against the CEO acted in their personal capacity on behalf of the PIC, whether the staff members communicated details of the corruption case against the CEO with PIC, and if not, reasons why, and the status of the corruption case at the time.
Okay, can you briefly deal just on page 7 with the scope and nature of the investigation?
Yeah, this is typically our disclaimers. I'll go through it. 2.1, we say this scope of our investigation was limited to the information obtained from the PIC, other external parties, and interviews with employees of PIC and other external parties deemed relevant for our investigation. The nature of the assignment included the inspection of electronic and hard copy records and other related supporting documentation deemed necessary to comply with the mandate, and we relied on records provided by PIC and other external parties deemed relevant for our investigation. The findings contained in this report are based on the work performed to date of this report, which is 5 December 2017. Naledi has attempted to include all information relevant to our mandate. However, it is possible that documents and information exist which are not made available to us, or that Naledi is unable to locate. Any documents or information brought to our attention after the date of the report which could affect our findings may require findings to be adjusted and qualified accordingly. This report is neither designed nor intended to provide legal advice. A legal opinion should not and cannot be so construed.
Okay, now can you turn to paragraph 4.2 of your report?
Okay.
And that is a timeline.
Yes.
Can you just briefly explain that to the Commission?
Yes, so we set out just a timeline of the events relating to the corruption case against the CEO of the PIC at the time, just to make it easier for the reader of the report. So I'll start on the 1st of September 2017. An unknown individual using the alias James Noku sent an email to the PIC Exco, the executive committee members, and the board of directors, making various allegations against the CEO and the CFO. And then again in September 2017, the date is unknown, Mr. Maisela, who was the head of IT security, had opened an inquiry with SABC, with inquiry number 0609-2017. And again in September, a date unknown, the head of IT, which was a position held by Ms. Vuyoka Zimenya at the time, and the head of internal audit, Lufuno Nemakovani, tried to open a case with SABC, but they failed as SABC. Apparently, this is based on their version that SABC believed there was no basis for the case. Here, they were trying to open a case with SABC to try and uncover who James Nogu was. They wanted SABC's assistance for purpose of a subpoena.
Just to assist the Commission, is that a reference to Section 205 of the Criminal Procedure Act?
Yes, correct. And then on the 2nd of October, Mr. Maisela, who was the head of IT security, we found that he had opened a corruption case against the CEO of the PIC, Dr. Mutulu, without any authority from the PIC. On his own version, he mentioned that he made an error in opening the corruption case, the criminal case against the CEO of the PIC. And we interviewed Mr. Maisela again on the 6th of October 2016. On 6 October 2016, Mr. Maisela... 2017. Mr. Maisela informed Ms. Menya, who was the head of IT at the time, about the case that he registered with SABC. He, however, didn't mention it in notifying about the case that was registered with SABC. He failed to mention that the case was a corruption case against the CEO of the PIC. And on the same day, Ms. Menya, who was the head of IT security, forwarded an email about the case to Dr. Mutulu, including the case number to the CEO of the PIC. But then again, there was no mention that it was a corruption case against the CEO of the PIC. On 13 October 2017, Ms. Menya and Mr. Maisela, that's the head of IT and head of IT security, met with SABC officers in Parktown. It should be noted that this case was registered on 2 October in 2017 in Brooklyn, Pretoria. But on 13 October, Ms. Menya and Ms. Maisela met with SABC officers in Parktown. During the meeting, Mr. Maisela made a supplementary affidavit a second statement to the case.
Just for people not known to this area, Brooklyn is in Pretoria
Yeah, Brooklyn is in Pretoria.
and Parktown is in Johannesburg.
Is in Johannesburg.
Thank you.
Okay. And he made a second statement with the police outlining that he did not intend for a corruption case to be opened against Dr. Majila, that he meant for the a case to be opened for purposes of investigating, SABC assisting them to find out who James Nogu was. Ms. Menya requested the second statement from Mr. Maisela on the 16th of October 2017, which he forwarded to her. Then she forwarded that statement, that second statement, which states that we opened a case of corruption wrongfully. We wanted the case to be, to assist us in finding out who James Nogu was. She forwarded that statement to Dr. Majila on 18 October 2017. During October again, at a date unknown, SABC had notified Mr. Maisela about a meeting with the Minister of Police. They called him, he couldn't recall the date. They called him, they said, we're going to meet with the Minister of Police to brief him about the case against the CEO of the PIC because he's a high-profile individual, and then also to find out if the ministry have not initiated another investigation. So there's no duplication of efforts. And then he did not communicate that information to the PIC. And on 3 November 2017, SABC officers obtained the electronic version of the James Nogu emails from Mr. Maisela at the PIC. They in fact visited the PIC offices to obtain those electronic version of those emails. And he provided to them on a compact disc via CD. And on 7 November 2017, we interviewed Mr. Maisela and Ms. Menye. They both confirmed when we interviewed them that they did not notify Dr. Majila or the PIC about the corruption case.
When you speak, stay as close to the mic as possible.
Okay.
And rather than lifting your head and looking at counsel, look at us.
All right.
Then you'll stay close to the mic.
Okay. Thanks, Judge. All right. And then, yeah, see, we interviewed them on 7 November 2017. They both confirmed that they did not notify Dr. Majila and or the PIC about the corruption case. That's the end of the timeline.
Thank you. Now, I don't think it is necessary to
Here's
read.
Here's a question.
Okay, it's on now. Okay, thank you. Sorry, did they give any reason why they had not informed the CEO or that he was implicated in those investigations?
Yes, I questioned Mr. Maisela as to why he had not notified Dr. Maisela. His response was that he told his boss, who was the head of IT security, Ms. Menye, he'd requested him to notify Dr. Majila. That was his version. He said he told him to notify Dr. Majila. And then he didn't do so himself. Then I asked Ms. Menye to say, did you then notify Dr. Majila or the PIC, anybody within the PIC? She said she was yet to do so. And that was on the 7th of November when we interviewed her. And this is something that had occurred on 2nd of October 2017. So she said she was yet to do so. That was the answer.
Now, to try and save time, Mr. Lekubu, as I understand your report, part of your mandate was to establish who is James Nogu.
Yes.
To date, you haven't established that.
No, we have not established that today.
Right. The content of the emails regarding the then CEO, Dr. Machela, and the CFO, what was it about?
It was not really the focus of our investigation. It contained allegations involving the CEO of the PIC. One of the allegations I recall top of my head without having the email before me is that he was alleged to have facilitated funding for a woman that he was linked with, he had relations with.
All right. Mr. Commissioner, I'm just placing it on record, The allegations contained in the email of Nogu was investigated by my colleague Butlander SC. He conducted a forensic investigation and he filed a written report. That report is available. It is a report requested by National Treasury, but I'm in conversation with National Treasury and I would hand up later, if not today, tomorrow, the content of that report. That report found that there was no substance in the alleged relationship between the then CEO and Ms. Pretty-Low, and also found that it was factually incorrect that Dr. Mutulu funded a legal entity of this lady. But so I'm not going to dwell on that part of the investigation because there was a forensic investigation mandated by National Treasury, reported on, and I will hand that report later up to the Commission.
I may just mention, Mr. Libber, that a copy of that report, the Butlander report, I call it the Butlander report, was made available to us, but it's fine for you to hand it up formally.
Yes. I think it would just be correct, Mr. Commissioner, to hand that up formally as an exhibit to the Commission. All right. What is important further, and we'll come back to that, you also investigated the leaked information. And to do that, you had to image computers. Is that correct?
Yes, we imaged computers of several staff members.
I think you must just speak up again and just to explain the technicality of this, what exactly is meant by imaging a computer?
We create a mirror image of a computer using specialized software. So we'll take a computer as is and we will image the hard drive. So all the data that's on that computer, will create a mirror image of it. That would include deleted data, every artifact that resides on that computer. And then we will then preserve, this is to avoid tampering, we will then create what we call a master copy, which remains sealed should there be any disputes regarding what was found on that specific computer. And that is kept safe. And then we create a working copy, what we call a working copy, then we'll start reviewing, interrogating that copy to locate. We perform what we call keyword searches. If I'm looking for a document, any document that contains Yane Lube, then I'll type Yane Lube, and then any document that contains the name will come through, will pop up. So we review, we look for specific evidence, specific information on that working copy. And that's a legally acceptable process that we follow, and the courts, accept it.
Yeah, it is a well-known tool, yeah, reliable and accepted in the legal process.
Yes.
Okay. Now, while you were busy with these imaging investigation, you discovered this criminal charge against Dr. Mutulu, which we have now dealt with. But to just finalize your report, yeah, before we go to the imaging, yeah, if you will turn to page 22 of your report, that is the one titled Investigation into Circumstances Relating to the Opening of a Corruption Case. Yeah. If you could just turn to page 22.
So just for clarity, we discovered the corruption case not through the imaging. We were performing what we call Mimecast reviews. Mimecast, it's also a tool most organizations use. Every email that you send, or staff members send or receive, goes through Mimecast Exchange server, so there's a copy of it. Even if you delete that email on your computer, Mimecast will have a copy of it.
Thank you, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I think it's a technical thing, and you must explain that fully to the Commission. What is that exactly?
Okay. And yeah, so that's how we discovered the matters relating to the criminal case. We imaged the computer subsequent to that.
Explain the server thing.
Okay, so yeah, so PIC, like many organizations, would use Mimecast solution. It's a company based in Johannesburg. In Sandton, they offer a solution where every email that it's sent by an employee of the PIC, it will go through the MIMecast server, their server, then the MIMecast server. And every email that gets received, before it's received by the PIC server, it would have to go through the MIMecast server. And that is, it provides you with email backups, that's the advantage of it, but also it just provides you with records of all the emails sent or received by staff who are on the PIC mailing list, in the sense that even if you delete the email on your inbox on your computer, MIMecast will still keep a copy of it. So you can wipe your entire mailbox, but we can go to MIMecast and get a copy of your mailbox, and we'll have all the emails that you've ever sent or received.
So it was in the course of that MIMecast exercise that you stumbled across the emails pertaining to the criminal investigation?
Yes.
Now, if we can turn to page 22.
22.
And it seems to me in 5.1a there is an error regarding the date.
Yep.
I suppose you're referring to September 2017 and not 13.
Yeah, that's correct.
Can you just, for the record then, briefly deal with the conclusions?
Yeah, so we concluded based on our investigations the following. That during September 2017, Mr. Nemagovan, who's the head of internal audit, and Ms. Menya, who's the head of IT, went to a Brooklyn police station in Pretoria to register a case with South African police to assist with identifying James Nogu. On their own version, they were, however, unsuccessful in registering a criminal case. As they went to SABC, they informed us they went to SABC with the emails from James Nogu and the attachment which was leaked in the James Nogu emails for an MST transaction. They presented that to SABC to say, would like to open a case because based on the following information. SABC said they did not see any criminality in there and they refused to register a criminal case. They then went back, SABC believed there were no grounds for opening a criminal case. The two employees then went back to the PIC and reported the same. They provided feedback to the CEO, Dr. Mutulu, then about the failure to open the case. The specific date they went in September is unknown, as they both could not recall the specific date. During September 2017, Mr. Maisela registered an inquiry with Cybercrime Unit of SABC with inquiry number CC06-09-2017. He, however, did not bring this to PIC's attention. It was not clear from our investigation who provided Mr. Maisela with the mandate to open that criminal inquiry. However, it was opened. On 2 October 2017, Mr. Maisela then approached the Brooklyn police station and registered a case of corruption against the CEO of the PIC, Dr. Mutulu. Although I've seen the statement that he made on the 2nd of October, although he did not specifically mention Dr. Mutulu as a suspect, he provided SABC with the James Nogu emails, which contain corruption allegations against Dr. Mutulu, and also the attachment that came with that email. And he attached that to his statement and say, these are the supporting documentation, and it says case of corruption. So, any logical conclusion there would be drawn that you're opening a case against the CEO of the PIC, because the allegations were against him and the case was opened as a corruption case. And based on the contents of the emails from James Nogu, Dr. Mutulu became a suspect in a corruption case registered by Mr. Maisela. Mr. Maisela appears to have made the decision to register a corruption case against Dr. Mutulu on his own without any mandate from the PIC. When we interviewed him, he informed us that he did not act as a whistleblower on the matter. He never said that he was a whistleblower. And on 6 October 2017, Mr. Maisela sent an email to Ms. Menya providing her with an update on the James Nogu emails. In the said email, he informed Ms. Menya that a case was registered with SABC at the Brooklyn police station. However, Mr. Maisela failed to mention that he registered the case as a corruption case, which implicated Dr. Mutulu.
All right, if I can interrupt you there. As I understand it, Mr. Maisela himself stated that he was not acting in his capacity as a whistleblower.
Yes.
But without that statement by Mr. Mayesela, objectively and from a forensic perspective, by going to the SABS with this email of James Nogu, with the instruction by his employer to get an 205 from the SABS, could he be considered a whistleblower?
No, unless he was James Nogu.
All right. Now, going to James Nogu, what he did, as I understand from your report, is to send James Nogu, send an email to the board, all the board members of the PIC and staff regarding these allegations against the CEO, the then CEO and the CFO. To be able to do that, can an outsider of the PIC do it, or must it be an insider?
To send the emails to the board and staff members?
Yeah, to have all those emails
email addresses
readily available.
And yeah, well, he ought to have collaborated with somebody within the PIC, but an outsider could do it. Typically, most organizations would not. They've got what you call the mailing lists, where you say Exco all, member staff all, and those mailing lists are not. Cannot receive emails from outsiders. They're normally for internal use. So an outsider should be able to just send an email specifically to a person they want to communicate with. But however, the PIC at the time, the the mailing list setup was such that those internal mailing groups could receive emails from external people. But be that as it may, it's the internal mailing groups. An outsider would not, it's not something you'd be able to guess. You'd need an internal person to have provided that information to
All right, you can skip the rest of the, can you go to page 23, paragraph Q?
Paragraph Q. Yes, so on 3 November, Mr. Maisela, the SABS investigating officers met with Mr. Maisela at the PIC offices to obtain the electronic versions of the James Nogu emails. Again, Mr. Maisela failed to communicate this to the PIC. We were informed by Colonel Nama of the SABS that the purpose of obtaining the electronic versions of the emails was to trace James Nogu. So he or she could provide SABS with information to support allegations raised against Dr. Mutulu. According to Colonel Nama, they consider James Nogu to be a whistleblower who could assist them with their investigations.
And you've just expressed your view that you don't agree with that conclusion by Colonel Nama. That Nogu is not a whistleblower, or a typical whistleblower.
Yeah, in my view, he was not a whistleblower.
Thank you. Do you know at this stage today, what is the status of this criminal matter against Dr. Mutulu?
I don't know. The last I spoke to SABS, when I was involved with the matter, they were pursuing the criminal investigations. I met with SABS at their offices in Johannesburg. They made it very clear that they're not going to ignore the allegations. They're pursuing the criminal investigation against Dr. Mutulu.
How easy is it to establish the identity of James Nogu?
It is quite easy.
How do you do it?
With the section, James Nogu sent the emails using a webmail account. Webmail is a South African company. If we get a SABS, with a SABS subpoena, we can subpoena webmail to provide us with the information of the owner of that email account, that James Nogu at webmail.co.za. You can register an email using an alias. I can call myself anything online, but with these web-based email accounts, they'll need what you call either a recovery email account or phone number. So you either have to provide them with your cell phone number or a recovery email. And they could provide us with that information. Would also be able to see the server, the IP address of where that email came through from. If it's an ISP, an internet service provider, would be able to then issue a further subpoena to them to understand who logged in from, what computer, and who the service, understand the service provider behind and be able to unmask the user. So it's pretty easy with the 205 subpoena. It's not a complex process.
Can you just lastly explain what you stated in 5.4 and 5.5 of your report on page 24?
5.4 and 5.5. We say 5.4, Mr. Maisela, we found that Mr. Maisela misled the PIC by stating that a subpoena will not be possible on the matter as the internet service provider as a French entity. He further stated that for any information to be secured, the National Prosecuting Authority would need to establish a mutual legal assistance treaty with the French authorities. According to Mr. Maisela, this was also not possible as there had to be a suspicion of an offense. He stated there was no evidence that James Nogu had committed any offense or a crime. According to Mr. Maisela, he was given the above advice by the cybercrime unit of the South African Police Service. And 5.5, we say, based on his advice, Mr. Maisela appears to have discouraged PIC from pursuing efforts to uncover who James Nogu was via a subpoena process. It is not clear to us whether Mr. Maisela was being deliberately deceitful or just misinformed.
Okay. Now, based on your investigation, if we can conclude this, Mr. Maisela there was a disciplinary hearing?
Yes.
You testified at that hearing?
I testified at that hearing, yes.
The chairperson of that hearing was Kasim SC from the Johannesburg Bar?
Yes, correct.
And what was the result of that disciplinary hearing?
He was found guilty and dismissed.
Okay. Now, if we can just deal, lastly, with your imaging of Mr. Maisela's computer. It is not in dispute. It's that Mr. Maisela was appointed at the PIC on the 1st of September 2017.
Yes.
Now, what did you find on his computer after you've imaged it?
We found amongst...
If you can, I'm sorry to assist the Commission, Mr. Commissioner, it is the other report titled Progress Update Review of Computer Images on Certain Staff Members, and if I can refer you to page 5 of that report, paragraph 10.
Okay. Yeah, so we found that Mr. Maisela was involved in the interception of email correspondence intended for Dr. Mutulu. In this regard, we found that he had extracted certain information, documents intended for Dr. Mutulu or parts thereof, and saved them on his computer. And we found that he was also involved in the possible falsification of his academic qualifications. He also accessed adult websites or content using his PIC computer.
Is it possible to tell the Commission, for instance, the interception of email and extracting of confidential information, on what date did this happen?
Yes, on the very clear one was a letter of engagement between Naledi and the PIC, which was signed by Dr. Mutulu on 13 October 2017. That letter of engagement, I sent it to Dr. Mutulu as PA, and he signed it. It was scanned and sent back to me. We found that document in Mr. Maisela's computer when we reviewed his computer image. He had deleted it. We found it in his recycle bin. He had saved it on his computer and deleted it, but we could see where it was stored on his computer and even the day he deleted it. So he had no reason to have that document, because that document was, we marked it strictly private and confidential, and it was restricted to just the CEO and myself. I did not even use my PA to send that document. I personally sent it. So we found that document on his computer. So he'd been intercepting, his head of IT security was intercepting the CEO's emails. We found other information which had to do with investment as an LMA risk document, which involved a transaction involving Deutsche Bank.
But before that,
yeah.
What date? Can you put a date? When did, he was now appointed on the 1st of September 27. Yeah. When did he start accessing this information?
The 13th of October, that's the first evidence we have that he had extracted information from the CEO.
Now, to be able to do that, must somebody grant him permission?
We don't know the manner in which he did it. When we asked him about it, he's reserved his rights, he refused to cooperate.
But in normal corporate business circumstances, if an IT person access the emails of the chief executive officer or the chairperson of the board of that institution, surely he can't do it just on his own free will. He must have permission from somebody to do it.
Yeah, the IT ultimately rested with the head of IT, which was Ms. Vuyoka Zimenye, but it should be noted that also that Mr. Maisel was the head of IT security, and due to his role, he had access to a number of systems within the PIC. So,
did that include accessing the computer of the CEO?
no, that was not part of his duties, and it's not something that was permitted within the PIC, no.
Now, I believe there's a term in your world to say that if you have that permission, you have the king's keys.
Never heard of it.
You've never heard of it? I thought you heard of that. But do I understand you correctly that for Mr. Maisela to access Dr. Mutulu's computer, somebody must have given him permission to do that?
Yes, he did not have the permission to do so, not by the CEO himself or any member of the board within the PIC, because I'd inquired with the PIC and he did not have permission to extract that information.
Who could have given him that information or permission?
Yeah, like I said, I don't know how he did it. He was uncooperative. He could have extracted, as head of IT security, he had quite a bit of powers, access to the systems. He could have done it himself, or alternatively, somebody ought to have given him access without authority, and we don't know.
Sorry, did you say being head of IT, he had powers to access other people's emails?
He's got, as head of IT security, he's got access to most of the systems. But that does not mean that he could go into people's emails. It's not one of his duties. He's responsible for IT security. So in a way, him and the IT manager, they control the IT systems within the PIC.
I think there's a misunderstanding. Just to clear it up, you interviewed Mr. Maisela in the presence of his lawyer.
Yes.
And you requested this information. Who gave him the permission?
Yeah.
What was the response?
He reserved his rights. He said he reserves his rights. He didn't want to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. This concludes the evidence of this witness.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Lukuba, I just want clarity on this. Mr. Maisela being head of IT,
Yes.
of course he would have access to, let's say, everybody's line, if one could call it a line.
Yes.
But whatever access he had did not mean that he has the authority or power to use it for his own purposes.
Yes. That's what we meant here. So accessing people's emails, it's not one of his roles.
Thank you.
Okay.
Once again, I'm sure Mr. Libber would have told you that you might be called again if necessary.
Okay.
Correct?
All right.
Thank
Understood, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. My estimate of this witness was a bit too conservative.
Just say that again.
My estimate of the duration of this evidence was a bit conservative. I have a witness available to carry on, but I need 10 minutes to just speak to this witness. Can I request that we have the tea adjournment now and then start at 11?
Start at 11 or when you call us and tell us you're ready.
Thank you.
Thank you. The hearing will adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. My next witness is ready to testify. His name is Mr. Vuyani Haku. Stand up.
Can I get your full names from you? Your full names?
My full name, Mr. Commissioner, is Vuyani Ako.
Yes. Second name?
The second name is Wellington, so it's
No, no,
Vuyani
no. I
Wellington.
can't hear.
So it's Vuyani Wellington Ako.
Haku.
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay. All right. Did you say commissioner or did you say your worship?
No, I said Commissioner.
Oh, good. I thought I heard your worship. Have you any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
So help me God.
No. Answer me first. Have you got any objections to it?
No, I don't have objection.
You don't have. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help me God.
So help me God.
Properly done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Mr. Haku, just tell us briefly, when were you employed by the PIC and in what capacity you are now serving?
Thank you, Commissioner. I was employed by the PIC on the 1st of October 2014. I'm currently serving as an executive head for unlisted properties.
And you report to?
And I reported to the Chief Financial Officer, the CFO.
What are your qualifications?
My qualifications include a Bachelor of Science in Town and Regional Planning and a Master's in Business Administration.
You have prepared a statement on my request. It is before the Commissioner and his members. Can you just look at paragraph 8 thereof and just explain that to the Commission?
The unlisted investment portfolio is comprised of private equity, impact investing, and unlisted properties. Private equity is where investments are done in shares between companies. Impact investing is more your developmental type investments like infrastructure, and in the unlisted properties. In unlisted properties, we invest clients' money in physical properties or in entities that deal with properties.
Now, to save time, can you just place on record that you have seen and read the statement by Mr. Roy Raja, who is the executive head of impact investing? Is that correct?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, I have seen the statement by my colleague and I have read it.
Is it correct that the investment processes of these divisions are broadly similar to each other?
Well, it is correct, Commissioner, that the processes are broadly similar. There is, however, a difference in the post-investments of the process. So the difference is in the post-investment. Once the investment has been done, there is a slight difference there in the process.
And you also receive your mandate from?
Thank you, Commissioner. We receive our mandate from our clients.
And they are?
The big ones are the Government Employees Pension Fund, the GPF, the Unemployment Insurance Fund, the UIF, and the Compensation Commissioner, the CC. Those are our main clients.
All right, in paragraph 12 and 13, 14, it is similar to the impact investment testimony of Mr. Raja. And just in paragraph 13, you mentioned there may be circumstances where proposals will be referred to the Social and Ethics PIC board and or the client. Can you just explain in what circumstances?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Yes, this is also similar to the whole of unlisted investments. So in circumstances whereby a reputational risk, for instance, is likely to arise in an investment, that investment, it will be referred to the Social and Ethics Committee to determine if they have appetite or they are concerned about the investment.
All right. Now, can you just explain to the Commission how do you get involved in this unlisted property deals? Is it like the impact people where you have walk-in clients, most of the work comes in through the door, or how does it happen? There's a question, sorry.
Yeah. Just before you go forward, just can you please give us a sense of the size of the fund and maybe the building, the buildings, the numbers, just to get the context right.
The size of the unlisted properties is about 50 billion. The number of buildings is approximately 162.
The next question is, what would separate direct buildings versus listed property? What would be the key differences? Why do you guys go to unlisted versus listed on the JSE? If you could highlight some key differences there.
Well, in unlisted in investments, we deal with the properties directly. So whereas in listed, they invest in an entity which is in the JSE. And one of the reasons why the client still want to invest in unlisted is because of the developmental impact nature of what we do. For instance, when we invest in a brand new, say, shopping center, so there will be an opportunity there for job creation, there will be an opportunity there for enterprise development.
Thank you. Can you just tell the Commission then how you start with this investment? Is it a walk-in client? Is it referred to by, is there a deal origination by the PIC investment professionals? What is the situation there?
Well, thank you, Commissioner. As indicated under 16, it's a combination of everything. So, but in majority, it's more clients working in.
So that's 16A?
Yes, correct.
Now, Mr. Commissioner, from paragraph 16 to 60 is basically exactly the same as explained by Mr. Rajar, the executive head of the impact investment portfolio. Can you confirm that, Mr.
Yes, correct, Commissioner.
Haku? Now, then, let's deal then from paragraph 61 of your statement, where there is this difference then with regard to the other investment portfolios.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let me deal with the standard one first, because once an investment has been done, the ESG team and the PMV team will be responsible for monitoring that investment. So in unlisted properties, we also have that as well. So and that part sits outside in our case, properties. It sits somewhere else. There is an executive head responsible for that. So there is some kind of an independence there.
Who is that? Sorry, who is that executive head?
It's my colleague Rubina Solomon.
Thank you.
Okay. And then where there is a big difference is that in our case, we have asset management and then we have property management as part of the post-investment monitoring. And now typically your asset management maybe let me start with property management. Property management can either be insourced, that is, it can be in-house, or it can be outsourced or outside. So property management typically deals with the day-to-day, its operations, its collection of rentals, its management of arrears, its repairs and maintenance, cleaning, security, checking, monitoring of mechanical equipment. So it's more your operations type. So in our case, this function is outsourced. It's done outside the PIC. So,
And the PIC then pays a management fee to that outsourced entity.
That is correct, Mr. Commissioner. You pay a property management fee in line with the market. So that is the property management part. And the second part is the asset management. Now,
Sorry, a question there, because you indicate that your property management is outsourced to Moana, right? Can we get a profile of Moana provided? And you say you have an interest in that. What is the size of the PIC interest in Moana?
Thank you, Commissioner. The size of the PIC interest in Moana is about 76%.
76%?
76%, yes.
And you call that outsourcing?
Yes, so because it is done outside the PIC.
Just another question before you go to the asset management. I gather you're gonna deal with it. Maybe going back, just in terms of developments, do you create your own developments, or people come through the door to say they got a shopping center to develop and all that? So how does the process work within the PIC?
Thank you, Commissioner. In-house, we have a development team. And then when we get a client from the outside wanting to, say, invest in a development, it's a shopping center, wherever it is, and then, so that development will be done by that client in conjunction with our team in-house. So we do a co-development because in most cases we invest for a long term, so we co-invest alongside that client. And then when that development is done, we want to make sure that the product suits the needs of our client. So it's both.
The bulk, these developments, are they people coming through the door, or you guys develop your own buildings?
For brand new developments, Commissioner, it's more people coming through the door. So, but where it is about an existing property where we want to redevelop, for instance, it's more in-house. We do that alone.
All right, thanks.
Just in relation, you've mentioned shopping centers as a focus of development. Could you give us an indication in the investment, whether it is, or how much or what proportion is things like shopping centers or housing developments, and what is it, low income, mixed income, high income property developments for housing? Do you have a housing development strategy given your transformation mandate?
Thank you, Commissioner. Let me deal with the housing aspect first, because our mandate doesn't allow us to do housing developments. I'm talking now properties. So we don't do housing developments unless that housing is part of a mixed-use development that we do. So, I mean, the example of that would be a V&A waterfront. There is residential there, but the residential does not become the primary use of that development. And
but sorry, just on that, if you're using that as an example, how would that square with a transformation developmental goal if you're doing residential accommodation in the V&A waterfront? That's income generating certainly, but not necessarily transformational.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. So I was citing that as an example, but within the PIC in impact investing, for instance, so part of their mandate is to deal with what we call affordable housing. So that is, housing in general is dealt with there. So,
Yeah. Just another question. You know,
You were still going to carry on.
yes, Commissioner, there was a question asked on the split. I was going to deal with that with your permission. So maybe let me just give this picture first. So we invest in retail, which is shopping centers. We invest in offices, well, the normal offices, and then we invest in industrial portfolios. And then there will be other specialized, maybe acquiring land for strategic reasons. The split is that our portfolio is biased towards retail. It's about 60%. Retail, your question on the split. Retail is about 60% of our portfolio. And then offices is about 25%. So, and between specialized and industrial is the difference.
question, making developments, there's a lot of architectural work, quantity surveying and all that. Do you use a supplier list? And within that, what are your BEE sort of requirements for those?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, there is a database of suppliers which doesn't sit within properties. It's part of the finance division. Procurement sits there. So, but when we do developments or when we procure, we have a biasness towards BE, and normally we use level 4 service providers, and we also tend to look at 51% BE ownership.
Please carry on.
So I think I was going to get to the aspect about asset management. So I was still explaining the differences. Property management, I think I have done. Now the second one is asset management. Now asset management, this one is done in-house. So what we do is we allocate our asset managers maybe 30 to 40 properties, depending on the value of those properties, to manage from a strategy point of view and performance point of view. So the asset managers, their duty on a day-to-day is to make sure that they drive performance on those properties. So, but there is always a link directly between the property manager and the asset manager. And one of the things that they do on a monthly basis is to sit and analyze reports of performance in terms of arrears, vacancies, and repairs and maintenance, etc.
Can you just then explain paragraph 65?
So paragraph 65, Commissioner, deals with the disposal or exit of investments. Now, one of the things about properties is that we invest for a long term. So, but in the event that we need to exit an investment, say dispose of a property, there is a process which exists in-house which guides how we can dispose of that property. So, but also that decision to exit an investment will be informed by the strategy of the asset manager for various circumstances.
Question? Can you please give us a breakdown between new developments or purchasing shares in current developments like the VNA, which you guys bought?
Sorry, Commissioner, I didn't get that question well.
A breakdown between engaging in new developments versus buying shares in current development like the VNA, which you guys bought from others.
Okay, so our portfolio is split between what is called the directly held and indirectly held. So indirectly held is where we invest in entities that deal with the property investments. So, for instance, you'll find that a VNA sits in an entity. So, but the majority of the developments that we tend to do is more on the directly held. So, because of the reason which I mentioned before of a social impact.
But what is the percentage between what you build are new buildings versus what you buy, whether direct or or otherwise? Am I clear?
Yes, Chair, I would say it's about 60-40.
60 to what?
60 to what we do directly.
40 new buildings, 60, different things.
So I would say 40 brand new buildings which we do ourselves, and then 60 those that we invest in an entity.
You buy, okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Thank you. Now, the Commission heard evidence that the listed part of the business comprises about 80% of the business of the PIC. Is that correct?
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Yes, the listed is in majority, it's about 80%.
Now, from the balance of 20%, what is the percentage of your division?
The percentage of properties is about 5%.
In other words, although the numbers are big, I think you said 50 billion, it's a small portion of the business of the PIC.
That's correct, Mr. Commissioner.
Now, you have heard, or it was explained to you before, the terms of reference of this Commission of Inquiry. Do you know personally of any impropriety in the PIC relevant to the terms of reference?
Mr. Commissioner, other than those which are in the public domain, to the best of my knowledge, I am not aware of activities of impropriety in investments.
Can you just explain, I think it has been done before, what is meant by the Chinese wall between listed and unlisted?
So unlisted and listed have, for instance, different PMCs for the reason that we're not supposed to know what is happening in the listed. So we mustn't have that information. So in unlisted, we don't know what is happening in the listed because of that Chinese wall.
To take a practical example, there was in the press the IO investment.
Yes, Chair.
And it was reported that all this happened in December 2017, the meeting of the PMC. Did you know about IO in 2017 or 2018?
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I would not have known because of the Chinese walls. I don't sit in the PMC responsible for listed investments.
When did you learn of IO for the first time? that there was a, let's say, a newsworthy item about Aya?
Well, Chair, I don't remember the exact dates, but I read about it in the press. So, but I got to see more information when we were presenting documents to SCOPA last year.
Is that December 2018?
Yes, sir.
If there's not further questions by the Commissioner or his assistants, Mr. Commissioner, this is the evidence.
Okay. Thanks. Are you aware of any member of staff or board who on their own, or directly or indirectly participated in any of the equity investments?
Mr. Commissioner, to the best of my knowledge, I am not aware.
Two questions. The first one is just give us a sense of the staff number and what they do, generally within those broad categories as a first question. And then the second one is your division reports to finance. One, can you give us some reason why it's not reporting to unlisted side?
Thank you, Commissioner. I assume that the staff number you're referring to is property staff number. So in properties, we are about 22. So within properties, we have an asset management team, and then we have a development team, and we have a team that deals with transactions and deals. So, but in total, we are about 22.
And the second question? Can you
This,
remember that? That you report into finance versus unlisted side. You give me some reason for that. Any reason?
Mr. Commissioner, I do not have an answer.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Sorry, can I just ask about the bonuses? It appears that there is some unhappiness with regard to the payment of bonuses, etc. Do you know anything about that? And if so, what happened?
Yes, Chair, I am aware. Well, I think the general feeling is that the determination of bonuses is not a fair process. And I think the feeling is that the determination of bonuses could be more certain, could be more clearer.
Okay. Just to follow up, would you say the salaries or the packages that people get within your division, are they competitive? Are they market related or competitive within PIC, the employees, versus where they could go to?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Competitive?
Yes.
Sorry, once more. You said the determination of bonuses is not fair. Where does the unfairness come from? Is it inside the PIC or outside of it?
Well, Mr. Commissioner, I am not so close to that process, so I'm just indicating, what I feel and what I get from other people.
Thank you.
While we're on that score, Mr. Commissioner, perhaps I can ask this witness, do you understand the process regarding short-term and long-term incentives to employees?
Well, there is a remuneration policy that deals with that, Chair. So, but the determination of bonus, it does not necessarily follow that according to me.
Is that is causing the unhappiness amongst employees?
I would say so.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, that is the evidence of this witness, and I'm outpacing myself at the moment, but I've made arrangements for the next witness to be available earlier. Can we start at 12, hopefully, or as soon thereafter as possible?
Start at 12. Yes. Fine. Thank you, Mr. Lukubo. Aku, that was the previous one. I'm sure the advocate told you that if necessary, you might be called later. Again? You understand that?
Yes, Commissioner.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now adjourn until 12.
Or when we call.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. We are ready to proceed. The next witness is ready to take the oath.
Your full names, please, sir?
Good day, Mr. Commissioner.
I'm afraid you'll have to repeat that, please.
My name is Albert van Driel, a member of the Association for the Monitoring and Advocacy of Government Pensions.
All right. Do you have any objections to taking the oath?
Do you have objections taking the oath?
No objections.
No objections. Do you confirm or swear that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Your right hand, please. So help me God.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Mr. van Driel, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, sir.
Can you start off by telling the Commission who or what is the AMAGP?
Yes, I can do that, sir. The Association for the Monitoring and Advocating of Government Pensions is a non-profit organization consisting of voluntary members of the Government Employees Pension Fund who are required to act for the benefit of all serving government employees, which is 1.3 million employees, GEP pensioners and dependent members, who are approximately 430,000 of the fund. The AMAGP have a Facebook page with over 6,000 people and employees with a broad spectrum of expertise and experience to support achieving AMAGP's objectives. We also have over 500 members who permanently joined AMAGP.
And what is the purpose of AMAGP?
The purpose of AMAGP is the monitoring and the advocacy of GEP's funds, hereinafter referred to as the fund. The objective of these activities is to ensure that the GEP nurtures the sustainability of the fund as well as the legitimate benefits of pensioners and their dependents. This includes guarding any form of mismanagement or corruption.
And can you then just briefly deal with the purpose of the submission?
Mr. Commissioner, the purpose of the Commission concerns the AMAGP with regard to the fund. We take note of the Commissioner's terms of reference as per Proclamation 30 of 2018. Our submission, which follows, is presented in accordance with the schedule contained in the proclamation.
Thank you. Just to make it clear to the Commission, Mr. van Driel, this presentation is the product of a team. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
And I believe that most of the financial information and statistics in this presentation came from Mr. Christo van Dijk, who was a state auditor and worked for many years in the office of the Auditor General.
That's correct, Mr. Commissioner.
Now, you have a reservation with regard to the submission in paragraph 4. Can you just state that for the record?
Yes, sir. Our sources of information, apart from the annual reports of both the Public Investment Corporation and the fund, that's the GEP fund, are dependent to a great deal upon investigative journalists, but we also consult as many websites of organizations involved as we can.
Please proceed with paragraph 5 of your presentation.
So can I please, before I proceed with paragraph 5 of the presentation, make a point about the Older Persons Act number 13 of 2006.
Sure.
Just a summary of the Act, I'm only going to give that, Mr. Commissioner. It says to deal effectively with the plight of older persons by establishing a framework aimed at the empowerment and protection of older persons and at the promotion and maintenance of their status, rights, well-being, safety and security, and to provide for matters connected therewith. Shall I continue?
Please.
The considerations for the investigation by the Commission are, first of all, the interdependence between the Government Employees Pension Fund and the Public Investment Corporation. Because the PIC, if I may use the abbreviation, because the PIC is only an agent which does the investments for the Government Employees Pension Fund, it means that there is a very strong relationship between the GEPF and the PIC. And the reason for that is also not only the fact that they do the investments, but because almost 88% of the assets being invested by the Public Investment Corporation is funds coming from the Government Employees Pension Fund. The primary responsibility of the GEPF, according to the 1996 Government Employees Pension Act, as amended, Section 6, in bracket 6, the GEPF's Board of Trustees may delegate their powers, but not their responsibilities. The GEPF is primarily responsible for ensuring that the fund is managed in such a way that it is to the benefit of its members. The PIC is solely an investment agent of the GEPF and performs only the latter's orders in accordance with the mandate given by the GEPF and performs, given by the GEPF to the PIC. Of all the funds handled by the PIC, approximately 88% belong to the GEPF. AMAGP submits that the investigation risks being not good enough if it excluded the GEPF's conduct from the PIC investigation. As the principal, the GEPF remains responsible for the actions of the PIC, which is the agent to the GEPF, and its Board of Trustees are therefore complicit in the activities of the PIC. The AMAGP is of the opinion that the Commission should therefore also consider the GEPF, in particular the Board of Trustees responsible for actions with the fund by the PIC. In this regard, with respect to the duties of each individual trustee of the GEPF, the AMAGP refers to Appendix L. That was a letter written by our chairperson to the chairperson of GEPF.
Yes, carry on.
We remain concerned about the GEPF funds managed by the PIC, with the possibility of said funds being abused with alleged state capturing. We are of the opinion that the trustees at the GEP are the first line of defense in preventing the capturing of the GEP and also the PIC. The available evidence is that the danger of state capture does not derive from within the GEP or the PIC. The breach of promise issued by academics of 4 universities, a report indicates that the danger to the fund originates from the presidential and other executive levels. Accordingly, the ultimate protection of the fund is their fiduciary duty by the diligent application by the fund's trustees. The trustees are also duty-bound to urgently institute very specific measures to resist all attempts from political level to capture the GEP. The GEP funds that are presently administered by the PIC, it's actually invested by the PIC, ensure that all investments are made with the utmost care and the sole interest of the fund and its members of the fund. Ensure that state capture of the PIC and the GEP in whatsoever form will be thwarted, and amend the GEP mandate to the PIC to such an extent that the 3 points above are actually affected.
Can I interrupt you here, Mr. van Driel? In summary, is that the submission of your organization that this commission, in performing its mandate, should also look at the GEPF and Board of Trustees?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Question? Yeah. 2 questions. One. The 12% of the PIC money is managed for UIF, compensation funds, and the others. And so it would appear that the PIC doesn't only manage GEPF money. So how do you sort of reconcile that with saying that, you know, the PIC works for the GEPF?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, we understand that very clearly, that there are about 12% of the funds which are done for other organizations as well. We actually do have a problem. It's not written into this submission, but we do have a problem that the mandate given by GEP to the PIC was last properly updated only in 2011, because the mandate given has the date of the year 2011. Does that answer your question, sir?
In some ways. Let me just go to the second question. The PIC was separated from the Public Investment Commissioner, so it's an act, you know, the PIC Act 204, 205 and all that. And within there, as far as I know, there's no link saying the PIC and the GEPF are linked, you know, because those are, the PIC is a separate company governed by the PIC Act.
I'm not getting that.
Is that clear, Yanni?
I'll just assist. In terms of the Act, the 204 Act, there's no link between the GEPF and the PIC.
Oh, that's the act of the PIC.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, that is a very good question. And that is one of our main problems also. The 2004 Act for the PIC is an act given by government to the PIC as an SOE of the government. And therefore, there is quite an amount of conflict between the Act governing the PIC and the Act which governs GEPF. I may also mention, sir, that the forerunners of the PIC, that started in 1911 already, the first organization upon which the PIC was built ultimately.
I'm not sure that I got the answer. I'm not sure. I'm not clear.
Do you just want to repeat your answer, your last answer?
Yes, Commissioner, I can do that. One of the big problems which we identified as we were monitoring both GEPF and the PIC was that the two laws, statutes governing each of those, that there is a certain amount of conflict in between those two laws. Because the PIC is a state-operated enterprise of government, and the GEPF has its own law, which was developed over many years, having started in the year 1911 already.
But what the relationship between the two, PIC and GEPF, is that not governed by the mandates, or is there something else that governs it? Mandates that are given by GEPF, or FP rather, to the PIC?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, the relationship, as far as we can see it, is built upon the mandate, the written mandate given by GEPF to the PIC, and that is the formal and legal relationship between the two organizations.
Is there any shortfall in the mandates that worry you, or that worries your organization?
Yes, sir, there is a shortfall in the sense that the GEPF and its trustees is supposed to invest, nurture, and build the funds of the pensioners, and that they have fiduciary duty to see that there are no trespasses or contraventions. In the case of the PIC, because they are an SOE of government, it means that the government can make all sorts of requests to the PIC, which may possibly be in conflict with the instructions in the mandate.
That's the fear. Or can you pinpoint anything? Has anything happened before that is a cause for concern?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner. Unfortunately, there is a very strong emphasis on things like doing developmental projects, and often those developmental projects are not giving yields, and some of them really crash within the first year or two, and therefore then that money is lost. There are also other things which can be identified And please, Mr. Commissioner, forgive me if I say that the thing of broad-based black economic empowerment, and I'm not being political here, also creates a problem. In the case of Dr. Iqbal Survey's projects, that has been clearly brought to the fore that the idea from the PIC in the beginning was that independent media, and then later on Ajo, about which there was a lot of noises in the press, were actually very, very poor investments for many reasons. But it would appear that Mr. Survey and his companies are not honoring the contract between the PIC and Sikunyalu, who originally got the loan, and then of course Ajo also. So those were very poor investments, and we have actually from our side already identified that as a total loss of about 6.3 billion rand.
Are you able to say that any one of those or both those investments were not in line with the mandates? Is there any complaint from your organization that those investments were not in line with your mandates, your organization's mandate?
So if it was meant for for solid broad-based black economic empowerment, there's no problem, would be no problem with it. But for instance, the conditions upon which the independent media contract or agreement between the PIC and Sikunyalu was done was extremely favorable for Mr. Iqbal Survey. I can give you some examples, Mr. Commissioner, about that. For instance, they only had to start paying rent, interest on the loan of after 5 years. Then what actually happened is that Sikunyalu and the independent media and other companies of Mr. Survey could not honor the agreement, and already at the end of the previous year, 2017, there was an impairment against independent media. Now this year, the annual reports came out very late at the end of November last year. There were also impairments related to independent media of more than 1 billion rand. And we therefore came to the conclusion that in the case of independent media, Sikunyalu and Ajo, that there is not a willingness to honor the contracts. And even if there was a willingness to honor the contracts, some of that money has been fizzled away, like for instance, into the family trust of Mr. Iqbal Survey, and not for operational purposes.
Would you say that there might have been a failure in considering the risk factor in these investments? I mean, when you do invest, there's risk involved, isn't it?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, you are quite right. That is one of the urgent risk factors. There are obviously many other broad-based black economic empowerment projects which have done very well. But in this case, that was just an example. It was really a disaster.
just as a follow-up, I know you're going to take us through some transactions and all that. What I wanted to understand from you is that you seem to be having issues with the mandate that the GEPF gives to the PIC. Because, you know, the GEPF does other things besides the investments. So is your biggest problem the mandates that are given by the GEPF to the PIC, or you got other bigger issues with regards to that?
Mr. Commissioner, basically the mandate given by GEPF to the PIC is quite a good document, providing that they always keep in mind, as previous ministers of finance have already said, that the interests of the members of GEPF and the pensioners and the members serving, who will be pensioners maybe in 50 or 60 years, that those interests of those people are actually served.
Just as a quick follow-up, so you say that document, you know, the documents or the mandates are very good documents. What would you like to see done, you know, given that this is a commission to make recommendations and the other things? What would you like to see done? Would you like the mandate to change, or, you know, what would you like to see?
Mr. Commissioner, yes, I think the mandate can be improved, but also if there would be other brokers doing investments for GEPF, then of course it could also make a difference between the mandate towards the PIC. However, we have noticed over the last, say, 4 years, that the mandate was not properly followed by the PIC, in the sense that, for instance, bonds of organizations and SOEs and so on, that there's a certain percentage of funds which should be spent on the bonds, and those percentages were exceeded to a great extent. But what is also very, very worrying is that Eskom, who everybody is bashing now at the moment, that Eskom eventually went down to a B2 credit grading. And a B2 credit grading is not suitable for investments, especially investments with large sums of money.
Can I perhaps assist here, Mr. Commissioner? Is there a problem is there a problem for your organization of the accountability of the PIC to the Board of Trustees? Or in other words, is there not proper oversight by the Board of Trustees in the performing of the mandate by the PIC? You follow what I say?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, that is a very relevant question. That is one of our big problems, actually, is that it would appear that the PIC was articulating the mandate according to their own thoughts of what is good and what is not good. We, for instance, are very much in favor of when one would invest in good projects for job creations, for instance, with pensions funds, whilst those projects would be good and delivering a yield.
Is that not happening?
It is happening in certain cases. It's not that all the projects are not giving yields. Some of the Isibaya projects are doing okay, but about 30% of the Isibaya projects are not doing very well, and some have fell by the wayside actually. I will carry on. So the breach of promise from the universities was then came into public domain, and they warned that both the GEP and the PIC, especially the PIC, would be a target for those that are busy with state capture or activities very close to state capture. Then the trustees are duty-bound to urgently institute very specific measures to resist all attempts from political level to capture the GEP funds that are presently administered by, invested by the PIC. I think that paragraph I've done, sir.
When you refer in the previous paragraph to presidential and ministerial level, are you talking about political interference? The danger to the fund originates from presidential and ministerial level. Are you suggesting there, or is your organization suggesting that there might be, or there is, or the fear is that there will be political interference?
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Commissioner. We know what it was like in the previous administration of the governing party, and it actually refers to the previous administration. The impropriety of reinvestments and decisions. Whether any alleged implied regarding investments and decisions, that is only actually a repetition of what is in the Government Gazette. Then the application of the fund for political purposes, often hidden under the politically obscure term developmental projects. The PIC and the GEP indicated on 11th of August that, in abbreviations, all will agree that the GEP and the PIC have a duty to develop socio-economic environment for financial returns. It remains the OMGP's position that such a duty is high risk and cannot be reconciled with prudent investments, especially if both the National Empowerment Fund and the Development Bank of South Africa, hereinafter called the DBSA, has or have development mandate or roles, and the PIC has invested copious amounts in both the DBSA and, for instance, the Industrial Development Corporation.
Would I be right in saying that you would want the PIC to only invest in listed companies, say blue chips or high-grade bonds, and not invest in developmental projects? Would I be right with that?
No, Mr. Commissioner, not necessarily. In the National Development Plan, it has clearly been written and explained that each SOE, and there are many of them, hundreds of them, has a developmental role. And we feel that if a certain organization has a developmental role, They should actually do their development role and not expect the HEP funds and the PIC to do that for them.
So basically then you are saying the PIC shouldn't play the role that DBSA is playing, and it should invest in only listed companies? Am I clear?
Sorry, can you just repeat that for the witness?
Yeah. The answer he gave was there are developmental bodies that the government, funds and all that. And so are you saying that the PIC shouldn't invest in developmental projects because there are other bodies dealing with that aspect?
Mr. Commissioner, I think there is one extreme example of Eskom, for example, where the PIC invested around about 90 billion rand in Eskom, and that is whilst the credit grading was down to B2. And even when everybody realized that Eskom was being misused by the Gupta family and so on. That is one example of where we feel that where there is bad management, poor governance, that the PIC should not be allowed to invest pensioners' money in SOEs that are high risk and where there's poor governance and where the results are not very good. We have been ensured by some members at the PIC that they are earning good interest from the SOEs of the money that they invest there, the bonds. But we also have come to the conclusion lately that the Eskom bonds, the debt on Eskom bonds seem to be quite higher than the money that was invested by the PIC in Eskom, which means that lately they say, we don't know how long, they were not able to actually pay the interest on those bonds.
Thank you.
My opkyk waar ek is. Yeah, and then after the first part of paragraph 7, we are now continuing with that, Mr. Commissioner. These organizations have the expertise to invest without placing the fund in jeopardy. They move closer to businesses and should have the experience and systems in place to deal with such matters. What will, for instance, be the position if the DBSA refuses an investment and an application to the same investment is then approved by the PIC? That would be a rather very difficult situation. Financing unlisted investments, Isibaya 1 and 2. The Isibaya amounts are now running up to about 130 billion rand, whilst in 2016 it started off with 40 billion rand. Should also be dealt with by instances such as the DBSA, the National Empowerment Fund, and so on. We also have the feeling, and we have looked at websites, sir, that the National Empowerment Fund is not doing the job which it should be doing. I'm not sure whether it's because they are short of funds, but they are not doing the job which they should be doing. Now, Isibaya is actually doing what the National Empowerment Fund should be doing. We believe that the fund is often used for political and non-profit purposes, while disregarding its primary purpose, namely to ensure the fund's sustainability and the legitimate payments to pensioners. There is no mandate to invest in politically driven projects that yield a poor return. Examples of these are the following. Risky investments in SAEs perform extremely poorly. They run on the verge of bankruptcy and at times must be saved by the government. Now, I might just add here, sir, that there are about 700 SAEs, and it's not all the SAEs that are bankrupt or that are performing extremely poor. There are some of them that are performing extremely well. The loans are also not fully guaranteed by government, and even if it does, the rating agency Standard & Poor on the 24th of November 2018 indicated that the government would not be able to honour those guarantees. With regards to Eskom, there was a typing error, sir, only 67%, not million rand, from around a 90 billion investment is guaranteed by the government. Due to poor interest, the PIC apparently no longer purchase Eskom securities on auctions because they no longer take place due to the lack of interest. They now buy securities directly from Eskom at prices that are unknown to the public. It is not the purpose of the fund to develop state entities. It's also an open question how much the investments in SOEs are currently worth. There is even a suggestion by a commentator during a radio interview that 100 billion rand of Eskom's debt should be written off to the PIC, as the fund is funded to 120%, which is not true. At the moment, the funding level is lower. It is disconcerting because the fund is not owned by the government, but by the members, but also because the fund is unfunded and it already faces sustainability risks. Investments in BBEE and ESG unlisted projects that yield little or no return.
There's a question.
Sorry.
On that point on 7.1, towards the end, you are saying that some commentators mentioned that, that the Eskom debt has got to be written off. What one has seen is that they refer to the fund as a defined benefit fund, that the GPF is a defined benefit fund, meaning that if it goes into default, the government will stand, for that fund. Do you think they are justified in saying that? That is not a defined contribution, it's a defined benefit fund, meaning that the pensioners will get their money no matter what happens to the GPF.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, that's also a very relevant question. These kind of calls have come from various angles lately. There's Mr. Dick Forsland who also made comments in a newspaper towards the end of November last year that the government can rather borrow money from the PIC and not from the World Bank because it will be at a better rate. So these kinds of suggestions have come from some sides. It's not a very general call, but it's come from a couple of organizations and also individuals. The problem really is that if there's a zero coupon rate on investments that had been made in Eskom, it would mean, first of all, that the GEF is losing that 67.8% guarantee by the government, firstly. Secondly, their income is, the cash flow of the GEF is already going down, and therefore it will have another negative effect on the cash flow of the GEF in order to be able to deliver on the promise of pensions and benefits to various categories.
Sorry, Commissioner, may I add something there, if you don't mind, on the question?
I didn't hear you.
Sorry, Commissioner, may I add something, if you don't mind, on the question?
I'm sorry, Mr. Commissioner. Can I just explain what's happening here? The presenter, Mr. Van Driel, is assisted by some of the organization members, and it's up to the Commission to decide whether they're going to allow some of the assistants to assist and talk directly to the Commissioner.
I'm very uncomfortable with hearing two witnesses at the same time, and when one is under oath and the other one is not. I would rather prefer you make a note of what you would have wanted to add, and then after he has given evidence, to take the stand and fill in what you want to fill in.
Commissioner, thank you very much. I'm comfortable with you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Can I, on this point, just ask that we take the lunch adjournment now, Mr. Commissioner?
Just a question before we adjourn.
Well, it's not quite a question, and perhaps it's also directed to you, Advocate Libbe. A lot of the points being made here are, I think, require follow-up and other information. And I was wondering whether both the current witnesses as well as yourself, perhaps I'm just going back a little bit to the earlier evidence as well. I think that I would certainly like to hear more explanation on our earlier witness why there was no follow-up on the James Nuga subpoena, because the assumption from that would be that they assumed Mr. Maisela was the same person, and I don't think that that should just be left to stand. I think the question about Moana, I think that we should be provided with all of the outsourced companies that have been created, who the boards of directors are, what kind of funds they manage, to what degree they manage, and when they were created, and how long, and the quantum of PIC contracts that any of these companies have had, irrespective whether they're in property or not. And in terms of the risk management from the PIC itself, is to get a better sense from them, is do they only look, while you look at an entity that has been mentioned here, Iqbal Surveys companies, the independent newspaper and the AO investment, are they looked at simply separately or cumulatively in terms of risk, and therefore what assessment is made of the total exposure, and are there limits in sense, not just the delegation of authority, but what that exposure is, so that when one's looking at your exposure to an entity, whatever it is, what is actually the total exposure and at what intervals? I mean, it's relevant in relation to the evidence being given here about independent newspapers not serving, but they were appointed in, if I remember, 2013.
Correct. That
deal took place. Therefore, when you follow with AO in 2017, what account did you take of the servicing of the debt or the loan or the investment in the 2013 investment to inform your decision? And I feel that the PIC should provide us with some information on that. I would also like to see the full exposure of PIC to all state-owned entities, as well as the service of the investments, the interest earned per entity, and whether there have been any defaults.
I'm in respectful agreement with those remarks. It's all noted and it will be addressed.
Okay.
Can I, just to add one point is that it appears to me that a lot of people lost jobs because of the leakage of the, some information. So I just wanted to determine whether that is the case, and can somebody come and tell us how those reports which we dealt with in the morning have contributed to the job losses or loss of jobs for the IT people and the others.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Also noted, it will be addressed.
What do you suggest? What time we come back?
We can adjourn until 2 o'clock for the lunch adjournment, Mr. Commissioner.
We'll adjourn until 2 o'clock.
Tevrede, meneer.
Gaan goed zo verder. Kan je hoor?
Ja,
Sukkel maar.
nou heb ik het weer.
Hallo, ek is Jan.
Dus Antonia is ons voorzitter van Magic.
Ek is jammer, maar ek het aanvanklik tyd 'n bietjie later gehad. Ek moet eerlik by die